Commander Maya Reeves was having what she liked to call a perfectly normal Tuesday, which in her line of work meant she was currently staring at approximately 300 alien warships that had just materialized out of hyperspace around her single reconnaissance vessel. Well, Maya said, leaning back in her command chair with the kind of relaxed posture that would have given her academy instructors heart attacks. Jake, remind me what our mission briefing said about encountering massive hostile fleets today. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, her second in command, was frantically checking his instruments with the dedication of someone who really hoped the sensors were malfunctioning. Commander, the briefing said, routine surveillance of the Kepler 442 system. No mention of, and I quote, accidentally stumbling into the galaxy's most uncomfortable family reunion. Maya chuckled. Accidentally. Right. That's adorable. She took a sip of her coffee, which had somehow remained perfectly heated despite the fact that their ship was now surrounded by enough firepower to turn a small moon into cosmic dust. Tell me, Jake, what do you see when you look at those ships? Jake squinted at the tactical display. I see 300 reasons why we should have called in sick today, Commander. Wrong answer. I see 300 ships whose commanders are probably having a really awkward conversation right now about who exactly is supposed to be in charge of this little welcoming committee. Maya stood up and stretched, completely ignoring the fact that targeting locks were painting their hull like a Christmas tree. You know what the problem is with overwhelming force, Jake? That it's overwhelming? It's wasteful. You don't need 300 ships to destroy one tiny reconnaissance vessel. Unless Maya grinned the kind of grin that had made her famous throughout 3 sectors and given her commanding officers premature gray hair. Unless you're not really here for us. The communications array crackled to life, filling the bridge with the kind of static that suggested someone was trying very hard to sound intimidating through a universal translator. Human vessel. Came a voice that dripped with the sort of authority that had clearly been practiced in front of a mirror. You have violated Zephyrian space. Prepare to be boarded. Yo. Maya walked over to the communications console with the casual pace of someone heading to a coffee shop, not someone responding to what most people would consider a death threat. Jake, start recording. I have a feeling this is going to be one for the highlight reel. Recording, Commander. Should I also start composing our last words? Only if you want them to be really embarrassing. Trust me, Jake. In about 10 minutes, these guys are going to wish they'd stayed home today. Maya activated the comm channel. This is Commander Maya Reeves of the Terran Federation. I'd like to file a formal complaint about your customer service. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake actually checked to make sure their communication system was still working. Did you just file a customer service complaint with a hostile alien armada? Jake whispered. Nan. Jake, my boy, there's something you need to understand about hostile alien armadas. They're like customer service departments. They have very strict protocols. They hate it when you don't follow the script. And they absolutely lose their minds when you treat them like they're not the most important thing in the universe. Maya sat back down and put her feet up on the console. Besides, look at those formation patterns. Classic Zephyrian intimidation doctrine, Chapter 4, Subsection 12. They've got their dreadnoughts positioned for maximum visual impact, their fighters in perfect parade formation. And their commanders are probably arguing about who gets to deliver the scary speech. How do you know all that? Because I wrote half the tactical analysis reports on Zephyrian psychology when I was at the War College. Turns out when you study your enemies long enough, you start to understand exactly how predictable they are. Maya's grin widened. And Jake? Predictable enemies are my absolute favorite kind. The comm channel crackled again, and this time the voice carried significantly more irritation. Human, you will respond to our demands immediately or face the consequences. Maya looked at Jake and shrugged. Well, they asked nicely. I suppose we should introduce ourselves properly. Attention, Zephyrian fleet, Maya said, activating the comm with all the ceremony of someone ordering pizza. This is Commander Maya Reeves. You might know me from such greatest hits as the Proxima Incident, What Happened to the Entire Fourth Armada, and my personal favorite, Why the Andromedans now require therapy before engaging human ships. Jake made a noise that was somewhere between a laugh and a whimper. Commander, I don't think now is the time for your greatest hits collection. Nonsense, Jake. Now is exactly the time. Reputation is everything in this business. Maya leaned into the comm. I assume you've surrounded us because you think you've caught a single, helpless human ship wandering around where it shouldn't be. Am I close? There was another pause, followed by what sounded like muffled arguing in the background. Finally, a different voice came through the comm, deeper and more authoritative than the first. I am General Vorthak of the Zephyrian 3rd Battle Fleet. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be taken into custody for interrogation. Ah, there we go, Maya said cheerfully. The man himself. Jake, make a note. General Vorthak, 3rd Battle Fleet. Wasn't he the one who lost half his ships to that human cargo freighter last year? Actually, Commander, that was his predecessor. Vorthak is the replacement they brought in after the cargo freighter incident. Even better. Fresh meat. Maya cleared her throat. General Vorthak, what a pleasure to meet you. I've heard absolutely nothing about you, which in this business usually means you're either incredibly competent or incredibly new. Based on the fact that you just surrounded a single ship with your entire fleet, I'm leaning toward the latter. You dare mock the might of the Zephyrian Empire? I'm not mocking anything, General. I'm simply observing that using 300 warships to capture one reconnaissance vessel is like using a nuclear weapon to swat a fly. It's effective, sure, but it raises questions about your tactical judgment. Jake was staring at her with the expression of someone watching a friend poke a sleeping dragon with a very short stick. Commander, perhaps we should consider a more diplomatic approach. This is diplomatic, Jake. If I weren't being diplomatic, I would have pointed out that the Zephyrian Empire's military doctrine peaked about 50 years ago and has been coasting on reputation ever since. Maya paused. Oops, did I say that out loud? The silence from the comm was so profound that it seemed to have its own gravitational field. You see, General, Maya continued, completely unbothered by the fact that she had just insulted an entire interstellar military to its face. Humans have this peculiar reputation in the galaxy. We're considered unpredictable, dangerous, and slightly insane. Do you know why? Enlighten me, Vorthak said, his voice carrying the kind of barely controlled fury that suggested he was seriously reconsidering his career choices. Because we're the only species that looks at overwhelming odds and thinks challenge accepted. Most civilized races see 300 enemy ships and immediately begin composing surrender speeches. Humans see 300 enemy ships and start calculating how many we can take with us. Maya stood up and began pacing, her voice taking on the tone of a professor delivering a lecture to particularly slow students. Now, most alien species assume this is because we're suicidal or stupid. But the truth is much simpler. We just have a fundamentally different relationship with the concept of impossible. Your philosophy lectures will not save you, human. Oh, I'm not trying to save myself, General. I'm trying to save you. Maya's voice carried just enough sincerity to make it sound genuinely concerned. You see, attacking humans rarely goes the way people expect. Take the Proxima incident I mentioned earlier. 3 Zephyrian dreadnoughts cornered a single human destroyer. Want to know how that ended? Jake quietly activated the ship's defensive systems. Not because he thought they would help, but because it gave him something to do with his hands other than contemplate their impending doom. The destroyer was destroyed, obviously, Vorthak said, though his voice carried slightly less certainty than before. The destroyer was destroyed, yes, along with all 3 dreadnoughts, 2 orbital stations, and what used to be the moon of Proxima 4. The human captain's final transmission was, and I quote, "If I'm going down, I'm taking this whole system with me." Maya paused for effect. He did. But the comm went quiet again, and Maya could practically hear the sound of alien minds trying to process the implications. The thing about humans, General, is that we don't just fight to win. We fight to make sure that even if we lose, our enemies regret ever meeting us. It's not a sustainable military strategy in the long term, but it's remarkably effective at discouraging future conflicts. So, Maya said, settling back into her command chair with the casual air of someone discussing weekend plans, here's what I'm thinking, General. You've got 300 ships, I've got one. Mathematically speaking, you should be feeling pretty confident right about now. But instead, you're probably wondering why I'm not screaming, begging, or doing any of the things that sensible beings do when faced with impossible odds. Vortek's response came through gritted teeth. You will surrender now, or we will destroy you. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Maya said, sounding genuinely pleased. Classic intimidation tactics. Vary by the book. Jake, what chapter of the Galactic Warfare Manual covers this scenario? Jake consulted his tablet with the dedication of someone who had learned not to question his commander's methods. Chapter 7, Section 3. Overwhelming force and demand submission. Right. And according to that same manual, Jake, what should my response be? Immediate surrender, followed by cooperation with boarding procedures and interrogation protocols. Boring, Maya announced. General Vortek, I'm disappointed. I was hoping for something more creative. Maybe a dramatic monologue about the inevitability of Zephyrian victory, or at least some colorful threats about what you're going to do to me once you capture me. There was a pause, followed by what sounded suspiciously like someone having an angry conversation with their tactical advisors. Very well, Vortek said finally. You want drama? The Zephyrian Empire has ruled this sector for over 2 centuries. We have crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and brought order to chaos. Your species is barely a century old in space, and you dare challenge our authority? Better, Maya said approvingly, though I feel obligated to point out that our species being young in space is exactly why you should be worried. We haven't had time to learn proper caution yet. Your recklessness will be your downfall. Our recklessness is our strength, General. Let me ask you something. How many wars has the Zephyrian Empire fought in the last 50 years? We are a peaceful empire. We maintain order through strength, not constant warfare. Exactly my point. You've been so successful for so long that you've forgotten what it's like to fight someone who has nothing to lose. Humans, on the other hand, spent most of our recorded history fighting each other over everything from resources to religious differences to who had the better football team. Maya stood up and began gesturing enthusiastically, as if she were conducting a particularly engaging seminar. We've perfected the art of warfare through constant practice. We've developed tactics for every conceivable scenario, including many that most civilized species would consider ethically questionable or tactically insane. Insane tactics do not defeat superior numbers. Don't they? Jake, remind the general about the Battle of Thermopylae. Ah, Commander, that's from Earth's ancient history. 300 Spartans held off a vastly superior Persian force. Right, and before you point out that the Spartans ultimately lost, General, consider this. That battle became so legendary that humans still tell stories about it thousands of years later. We turned a tactical defeat into a strategic victory by making it so inspiring that people still get motivated by it today. Maya walked closer to the view screen, where the alien fleet was arrayed in perfect formation around them. You know what the real problem with your position is, General? You're thinking like a Zephyrian. Logical, methodical, predictable. But I'm thinking like a human, which means I'm considering options that haven't even occurred to you yet. Such as? Well, for instance, you assume I'm trapped here. But what if I'm exactly where I want to be? What if this entire encounter is going precisely according to my plan? Jake looked up from his console with the expression of someone who had just realized he might be missing something important. Commander, is this going according to plan? Oh, absolutely, Jake. In fact, we're running about 30 seconds ahead of schedule. Maya grinned at the view screen. General Vortek, I'm going to give you exactly one chance to withdraw your fleet and pretend this encounter never happened. Not because I'm afraid of you, but because I'm feeling generous today. You are in no position to make demands, human. Actually, General, I'm in the perfect position to make demands. Because unlike you, I know exactly what's about to happen next. Maya walked over to her command console and began entering a series of commands with the casual efficiency of someone who had done this dance many times before. Jake, activate the beacon. The beacon, Commander? Jake's fingers hovered over his console. Are you sure? Because once I activate that, there's really no going back. Trust me, Jake. It's time for the reveal. A soft chime indicated that whatever Jake had just activated was now broadcasting across multiple frequencies. Maya turned back to the comm with the satisfaction of someone who had just played their ace. General Vortak, I'd like you to meet some friends of mine. They should be dropping out of hyperspace in 3, 2, 1. Space around the Zephyrian fleet suddenly erupted with the distinctive energy signatures of ships transitioning from faster-than-light travel. But these weren't just any ships. Jake counted at least 50 vessels, each one bearing the distinctive markings of the Terran Federation's most elite units. Jake, would you be so kind as to introduce our guests? Jake consulted his tactical display with growing amazement. Commander, I'm reading the TFS Retribution, flagship of the 5th Fleet, the TFS Unstoppable, the TFS Overkill, and oh my God, is that the TFS Excessive Response? The very same. Along with their escorts, support vessels, and what I believe is the entire 7th Tactical Wing. Maya's grin was now threatening to split her face in half. General Vortak, meet the Terran Federation's Rapid Response Force. They've been following me at a discreet distance for the past 6 hours, just waiting for you to make your move. The comm channel erupted with what could only be described as panicked Zephyrian cursing. You led us into a trap. I led you into a teaching moment, General. There's a difference. Maya began pacing again, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a very important lesson. You see, this whole encounter started because your intelligence services reported a single human reconnaissance vessel operating in disputed space. What they failed to mention was that I specifically requested this assignment. Jake was staring at his tactical display like it contained the secrets of the universe. Commander, you planned this entire thing? Of course I did, Jake. The Zephyrian Empire has been probing our border defenses for months, testing our response times and reaction protocols. They needed to understand that humanity doesn't just react to threats. We anticipate them. Maya turned back to the comm. General, right now you're probably calculating whether your 300 ships can take on 50 human vessels. The math probably looks favorable to you. After all, you have numerical superiority. We outnumber you 6-1. You outnumber us 6-1 with ships designed for traditional fleet engagements against civilized opponents who follow established rules of warfare. My ships are crewed by humans who consider established rules of warfare to be suggestions at best. The tactical display showed the human fleet spreading into what looked like a completely chaotic formation, with individual ships taking seemingly random positions around the engagement zone. Jake explained to the general what he's looking at. Jake consulted his combat manual with the enthusiasm of someone who had just realized he was about to witness something remarkable. General, those ships aren't following any standard tactical formation, because humans don't use standard tactical formations. Each captain has been given complete autonomy to engage targets of opportunity using whatever methods they deem most effective. Which means, Maya continued, that instead of fighting one coordinated fleet, you're about to face 50 individual ships, each one captained by someone who has probably been looking forward to this fight for weeks. The comm channel crackled with what sounded like urgent conversations in multiple Zephyrian dialects. But here's the really beautiful part, General. You're not actually trapped. You could withdraw right now, report this as a successful intelligence gathering mission, and go home with your fleet intact. All you have to do is admit that maybe, just maybe, surrounding a single human ship wasn't the tactical masterstroke you thought it was. Maya sat back down and put her feet up on the console again. Of course, if you decide to fight, that's fine too. My people have been training for months for exactly this scenario. We call it Operation Teaching Moment. The tactical display showed something that Jake had never seen before. A Zephyrian fleet that appeared to be having some sort of collective nervous breakdown. Ships were breaking formation. Comm channels were buzzing with frantic communications, and several vessels appeared to be powering down their weapons systems. "General," Maya said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "I'm about to make you an offer that's going to save both of us a lot of paperwork. Are you listening?" "We're listening," came Vorthak's reply, noticeably lacking the bravado from earlier. "Good. Here's the situation as I see it. Your empire sent you here to test human resolve and gather intelligence on our defensive capabilities. Mission accomplished. You've learned that we don't just defend our territory, we actively hunt threats before they become problems." Maya stood up and began walking toward the view screen, where the combined human and Zephyrian fleets faced each other in what was rapidly becoming the galaxy's most expensive staring contest. "But here's what your intelligence services probably didn't tell you, General. Humans don't just fight wars. We solve problems. And right now I'm looking at a problem that could benefit both of our species." Jake looked up from his console with the expression of someone who was beginning to realize that his commander operated on a level of strategic thinking that most people couldn't even comprehend. "You see, General, while you've been focused on testing our defenses, we've been tracking a rather significant threat that's been building in the Andromeda sector. A species called the Devourers that makes both of our militaries look like children playing with toy soldiers." The comm channel went suspiciously quiet. "Jake, show the General our intelligence reports on the Devourer fleet movements." "Broadcasting now, Commander." "General, you should be receiving data on approximately 2,000 vessels that have been systematically consuming entire star systems for the past 18 months. Maya could practically hear the sound of Zephyrian tactical computers processing the implications of what they were seeing. "The Devourers don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't leave survivors. They're the kind of threat that makes territorial disputes between our species seem completely irrelevant." Maya paused to let that sink in. "They're also heading this way." "This could be fabricated intelligence," Vorthak said, though his voice lacked conviction. "It could be, but it's not. Jake, transmit our authentication codes and verification protocols. Let the General's people confirm the data for themselves." While the Zephyrians processed the intelligence reports, Maya continued her impromptu strategic briefing. "Now, General, you and I both know that individually. Neither of our fleets could stand against that kind of threat. The Zephyrian Empire has superior numbers and established logistics networks. Humanity has adaptive tactics and a complete willingness to try things that sensible species would never attempt." Jake was monitoring the Zephyrian communications channels and could see that Vortak's fleet was rapidly reaching the same conclusions that Maya had obviously arrived at hours ago. "What are you proposing, human?" "I'm proposing that instead of wasting time and resources fighting each other over disputed territory, but we start coordinating our efforts against a mutual threat that could end both of our civilizations." Maya walked back to her command chair and sat down with the air of someone who had just solved a particularly complex puzzle. "Consider it a trial run for future cooperation." The comm channel erupted with what sounded like multiple high-ranking Zephyrian officers trying to talk at once. Furthermore, Maya continued, raising her voice slightly to cut through the alien chatter, "I'm prepared to share the complete tactical analysis my people have developed for countering Devourer technology, along with our preliminary strategies for coordinated defense operations." "And in return?" "In return, you acknowledge that maybe surrounding single human ships isn't the most effective use of your military resources, and you help us establish a joint task force to deal with the real threat heading our way." Maya leaned back in her chair with the satisfaction of someone who had just turned what started as a potential battle into a diplomatic victory that would probably go down in the history books. "Oh, and General, next time you want to test human resolve, try sending a diplomatic message first. We're actually quite reasonable when people aren't pointing weapons at us." 3 hours later, Maya was sitting in her ready room, filing what was probably the most unusual after-action report in Terran Federation history. While Jake tried to process everything that had just happened. "Commander," Jake said, looking up from his own paperwork, "I have to ask. Did you actually plan all of this, or did you just get incredibly lucky?" Maya looked up from her report and grinned. Jake, in this job, the difference between planning and luck is mostly a matter of perspective. I knew the Zephyrians were going to make a move eventually. I knew they'd probably try to test us with overwhelming force. And I knew that if I gave them enough rope, they'd find a way to tie themselves up with it. She leaned back in her chair and gestured toward the view screen, where the combined human and Zephyrian fleets were already beginning preliminary coordination exercises. The Devourer threat was real intelligence that we've been tracking for months. I just figured that if I was going to have to deal with a Zephyrian fleet anyway, I might as well turn it into something productive. Jake shook his head in amazement. So instead of starting a war, you ended up creating the first human Zephyrian military alliance in galactic history. Not bad for a Tuesday, right? Maya stood up and walked over to the viewport, where she could see Zephyrian and human ships working together to establish communication protocols and tactical coordination systems. You know what the really funny part is, Jake? What's that, Commander? General Vortak is probably going to get promoted for this. He'll go down in history as the Zephyrian commander who successfully established diplomatic relations with humanity and created a strategic alliance against a mutual threat. Maya chuckled. Meanwhile, his original mission was to intimidate us into backing down from disputed territory. Jake joined her at the viewport, watching his crews from both fleets work together with the kind of professional efficiency that suggested this alliance might actually work. What's our next assignment, Commander? Maya pulled up her mission roster on her tablet, scrolling through a list of objectives that looked like they had been designed by someone with a very creative interpretation of the word impossible. Well, let's see. Intelligence suggests that the Andromedans are planning some kind of major fleet movement in Sector 7. There are unconfirmed reports of unusual energy readings near the Vega system. And, apparently, the Centauri Trade Federation wants to hire human ships as escorts for a convoy through what they're calling moderately hazardous space. Moderately hazardous? Jake, when alien traders describe something as moderately hazardous, it usually means they expect to lose at least half their ships, but they're hoping we can improve those odds. Maya closed her tablet and headed toward the door. I'm thinking we take the Andromedans first. It's been too long since we've had a good conversation with them about proper fleet etiquette. As they walked back onto the bridge, Jake couldn't help but notice that their ship was now surrounded by the largest combined human-alien fleet in recorded history. All of them working together to prepare for a threat that most of the galaxy didn't even know existed yet. Commander, he said as they settled back into their stations, do you ever have normal days? Maya looked around the bridge, where her crew was coordinating joint tactical exercises with alien allies who had been pointing weapons at them just a few hours earlier, preparing to face an enemy that consumed entire star systems, all while maintaining the kind of casual efficiency that suggested this was just another routine mission. Jake, she said, activating the navigation console and beginning to plot a course toward their next impossible assignment, normal is overrated. Besides, where's the fun in normal? The view screen showed the combined fleet beginning to move in perfect formation, the human and Zephyrian ships working together as if they'd been allies for years instead of enemies for centuries. It was the kind of sight that would have been considered impossible just a few hours earlier, but which now seemed like the most natural thing in the galaxy. Maya settled back into her command chair, already thinking about their next mission, completely unbothered by the fact that she had just accidentally prevented a war that created an interstellar alliance and probably changed the course of galactic history. After all, it was only Tuesday. The week was still young.